Our panel 12 of this amazing honor symposium. I hope you all have been going to some other presentations and enjoying learning about our undergraduate research. Some of you may have already heard, but if in case not, my name is Dr. Rebecca Muich. I'm an assistant dean in the Honors College. And I'm going to say up front that my PhD is in classical studies. So I study the ancient Greek and Roman world. So I am going to be as curious as you are, the rest of you are, about the topics of these really interesting presentations. We have 3 presenters today, and just to give you some ground rules, I'm going to ask each presenter to present for about 10 minutes, and then we'll give them about 5 minutes after their presentation for questions. If you'd like to ask a question, and I really strongly encourage you to do so, you can use the raise hand function in Zoom, or you can show yourself on camera and actually physically raise your hand. That's really helpful too for us to be able to see. If for whatever reason you're not comfortable speaking, it's okay to put your question in the chat, and I'm happy to read that to our presenters as well. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. So our first speaker is Alexis Cox. Alexis is a senior at UNCG Greensboro. She's in the Disciplinary Honors Program in Lloyd International Honors College, majoring in business administration with a concentration in management. She's also the head officer and founder of the UNCG Management Consulting Club. So welcome, Alexis.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, and it's good to see everybody. This is my, well, I presented this morning also, but this is my first time presenting here, so. Okay, so I got my inspiration to do this report when I was in an international business class, and I was learning about the different aspects of doing business in other countries. And so I thought it might be helpful if I put together a sort of profile that was like a summary of one country that maybe a business could look at. So that's where I got my inspiration. And so basically the purpose of this report is for global expansion is the first reason. If a company is looking to go into another country, they need to know things about that country, about the culture, about economically how they're functioning, about what good things, like what good industries could be profitable. Also, it can be a guide for expatriates, and expatriates are people that are from one country, but they end up moving into a different country to work. And so this is a brief overview for them. Also, it's good for risk assessments. Any sort of expansion always is risky, but risk yields good results a lot of times. So understanding the economic and political and legal factors involved with doing business with Israel is important for risk assessments. So Israel is considered a startup nation, and that's because it has a culture that's rich with innovation and creativity, and it's also really friendly for starting a business. It ranks number 13 out of 131 countries on the Global Innovation Index, and that's just basically different benchmarks for innovation in countries. Hebrew is the official local business language, but English is the official international business language, although there's a lot of other languages being spoken there too. And Israel has a high life expectancy of 83.5 years average. So how do Israelis communicate? What is their communication style? So Israelis have a direct form of communication, and what I mean by that is what they say is really what they mean. However, Arab Israelis are less direct, so there's a lot more implied meaning behind their conversation. Israelis are flexible with their time schedules, and so that means that their deadlines are not as strict. Also, they're more collaborative. It's not so much a chain of command culture, and there's a lot more consensus. So low physical distance means the distance that Israelis are comfortable speaking to one another in a professional environment. For instance, the United States in a professional environment, the comfortable space can be anywhere from 4 feet to 10 feet for professional associates. But in Israel, it's a lot lower than that, maybe around 18 inches. And yeah, it's a lot closer. So eye contact is also appreciated when speaking to Israelis. So Hofstede is a scientist that conducted a 6-year study, and it was over 50 countries. And he did it with IBM employees, because IBM is a multinational corporation. And he took 144,000 employees, and he ended up asking them a lot of survey questions. And he came up with these different dimensions of culture. And so when Hofstede's cultural analysis is put towards Israel, Israel has a low power distance. And that means that the power is more equally balanced in Israel. It's a lot less hierarchical, like I mentioned earlier, and a lot more collaborative. Also, Israel is an even mix of individualism versus collectivism, which means that they focus both on individual success and group success. Israel is also an even mix of masculinity versus femininity. And masculinity does not mean that they're really, strong or try to be strong or whatever. Masculinity means that they are achievement oriented. And the femininity means that they believe in caring for their people and also just their quality of life. Israel's high on uncertainty avoidance. So that means that they're not very comfortable with ambiguity. And so that means that they like structure and they are happy with security. Their long-term orientation score means that they're rooted in tradition and time-honored values. And the indulgence score, I could not find any information for that. It's actually a pretty new score that was added by outside researchers, and so there was no information for that score. So how easy is it to start a business in Israel? Well, Israel ranks number 28 out of 190 countries on a World Bank report of doing business with different countries. And number 28 is pretty high because 1 is the highest score that you can get. And that's because there's an average of 3 procedures or 11 days or 2.7% of income needed to start a business. There's also a lot of corporate transparency. And then in corporations, directors also have a lot of liability. So that's important. So the Israeli Free Trade Agreement that we started in 1985 is the first free trade agreement that the United States entered into. And some of these exports that are common to Israel are important because they're areas that are most likely going to be profitable for a business to invest into. So Israel has a complicated legal and political environment. First, they're a parliamentary democracy. And what that means is Israel has a president, it has an executive branch, and it has a legislature and a judiciary. And a prime minister is the head of the executive branch. They also have an interesting legal system mix, and it's a mix of English common law and then various religious laws and British mandate regulations. And also is really important, there has been an ongoing battle since 1948 between Israelis and Palestinians. And it is very complicated, and there's a lot of very passionate beliefs on both sides. And it's mainly over the West Bank territory. So all of these factors need to be considered when doing a risk factor or deciding to go into Israel to do business. So we heard about all the risks. So economically, what is Israel like? Israel is an open free market economy, and it ranks 26th in the world for economic freedom index. An economic freedom index describes like the rule of law and regulatory efficiency and government size, and also how open the markets are within a country. And because of Israel's culture of innovation and creativity, there's a high continuing economic growth there. Also, a telecommunication system is really important in a country for businesses to be able to prosper, because the employees need to be able to communicate together. That's how you do business. Environmentally, Israel is definitely taking steps to ensure that our world is the cleanest it can be. They are a member of the Paris Accord, and there's also regulations on emissions, water and air, pollution, and reducing greenhouse gases. Also, it needs to be said that energy-based markets have a high growth and profit potential. So if somebody wanted to invest in that sector, it's a good idea. So here's some of the sources that I found in order to compile this report. And in conclusion, this preliminary report is a good way for businesses to do a quick assessment on whether they think it's a good idea to do further research into moving into Israel. Also, it would be a quick guide if you were going to have to move to Israel for work. So for resources for further investigation into these issues can be found on the references slides. And also, if you wanted to look at the Federation of Israeli Chamber of Commerce, that's a great place to start. So any questions?
Alexis, perhaps if you wouldn't mind, could you stop sharing your screen? It makes it a little easier for us to see each other. There we go.
Yes. Okay.
Any questions for Alexis? Mary Lee, please.
Yeah, so I remember earlier in your presentation, you were talking about like physical distance between people.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know how that might have changed like due to COVID and people being like, I don't want you close to me, or?
So in what I was reading, as I was reading something in the United States recently about our distance, because I know that Israel's is closer than ours is, but it was saying that with COVID, it could have possibly extended out farther. I didn't see any peer-reviewed articles on that. It was just a website, and so I'm not sure how reputable that was, but yes, that's a great point to bring up, that probably has changed. It'd be something really great to investigate too.
Cool, thank you.
So the question I do have, how was the experience of obtaining like some of the information that you got from your presentation?
Well, I mean, first, and I'm not sure if I mentioned it, but I was inspired to do Israel because I've always wanted to go there and I've never been able to go there. And so it was pretty interesting, especially being able to compare the culture of what I see in the United States with the culture over there. I mean, even just little tiny differences, I try to think about and like imagine if it was like that in the United States. Like if we all stood really close and spoke to each other, or if our schedules were flexible instead of the rigid schedules that we seem to have. And so, and yeah, it's also a mix of collectivist and individualistic. And so I think that that's really important, because while thinking about themselves, they also think about, you know, the overall good. So gathering those sources, it was a little different because I'm used to finding peer-reviewed sources or looking for those, but for this report, it wasn't really appropriate to find all peer-reviewed sources because I needed to find really recent information because culture was changing. And yeah, it was also a little bit different. So, but thank you for the question. And did I answer your question?
No, you did. Thank you.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Anybody else?
It's helpful to hear that kind of discussion of what sorts of sources are appropriate for the kind of information you're looking for, especially for trying to get to real-time information. the peer review process is longer. So there is that little bit of a lag there behind what you can get. But I do have one final question for you, Alexis, unless anybody else wants to jump in. So I'm curious about the sort of next steps after you would kind of, you've done all this research on Israel, you've compiled a really kind of interesting look into their cultural practices. Would it be appropriate for you to suggest a type of business that might do well in Israel rather than just, a business that could do well there? Would it be helpful? And could you suggest such a thing if we were just playing around right now? What kind of a business would do well in Israel?
Well, I mean, I guess I'm not sure exactly. Well, okay, I can say one thing that I know that a tech business would probably do really well. I mean, a business that's really into innovation and change would do really well in Israel because of their innovative environment. And also, I mean, just starting a business, it says in Israel, it's a really friendly environment for getting all the permits and just beginning a business. And so a business like that. But also I would have to say, if you could match up a lot of the cultural markers in Israel to a different country, then if you already have an office in that country, in the other country, and just look at how well your office is doing in that other country, and then think about maybe the viability in Israel because of that comparison. So those are my answers to that question.
That's great. Thank you. All right. One more round of applause for Alexis. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. So we'll go ahead and move on to our second speaker, Mary Lee Newman. Mary Lee is a senior at UNCG, double majoring in accounting and finance and minoring in math. She's also a part of the Lloyd International Honors College. As she nears the end of her senior year, Mary Lee looks forward to starting full-time in the Masters of Accounting program at UNCG in fall 2022 and starting work at Ernst & Young after graduation. So the title of Mary Lee's paper is A Valuation of Nike Incorporated as of November 2020. So welcome, Mary Lee.
Cool. Thank you so much for introducing me. From the beginning. All right. Hi, I'm Mary Lee Newman, as Dr. Munich has introduced me. So I want us all to close our eyes for a second and go back in time. We are in November 2020. The vaccine, we don't know her. We don't know who won the 2020 election. Mask mandates are still a thing. Now we're going to open our eyes and pretend like we're looking at Nike Incorporated and we're asking ourselves, should I invest in this stock or not? Well, today I'm going to tell you the reasons why you should. Johnny Cash Penny once said that growth is never mere chance. It is the result of forces working together. Nike's had a challenging year in 2020 with the onset of a global pandemic that has not been seen in over 100 years. However, the firm has taken this challenge and learned and grown from it. Founded in 1964, Nike was originally called Blue Ribbon Sports and was an importer of Japanese shoes. However, after some legal disputes with its Japanese supplier, Nike, rebranded itself and was now called Nike, and produced its first pair of shoes in 1971. The next year, Nike signed its first athletic endorsement contract with a professional tennis player. Then in 1980, Nike it went public with an IPO, or an initial pricing option, of 18 cents. 4 years later, Nike signed its contract with Michael Jordan, allowing him to make his own pair of shoes, starting the illustrious Jordans. Through countless other celebrity endorsements and company acquisitions, Nike's popularity grew, resulting in a stable and reasonably priced stock that would be a great addition to any investor stock portfolio. So first, we're going to talk about some internal factors that Nike has put into place to be an amazing stock. First is its increased online presence. It has a mobile fitness app, and over the course of 2020, the demand has increased by 200% or 1 million new downloads. This allows for Nike to actively engage with its customers and build brand loyalty. Its social media has also grown with over 5 billion impressions. As Nike becomes more ingrained in people's lives, they don't have to spend as much money on advertising, but still reap the benefits of the sales. It's like we all know what the swoosh is. That's Nike. They don't have to tell us who it is. We see it and we're like, haha, Nike, brand recognition. They're also investing in RFID technology or radio frequent identification technology. It's like the barcodes when you see on a product at the grocery store that you scan. That's basically what it is. And even though it's a huge capital investment right now, it will lead to savings in the future by cutting down on cycle time, or the amount of time from when a product is made to it showing up in the hands of a customer. Actually, in the 2021 quarter one call, the CFO stated that the technology has actually reduced cycle time by 50%. This is a huge deal because it will cut down on overall costs of sales, leading to higher overall gross profit. Nike will also be able to keep track of its inventory more effectively with this technology. It will allow for Nike to see which areas of production are not as effective as others and make those changes, once again, cutting down on costs. It will also allow Nike to be more accurate in tracking where these shipments are going, allowing for them to have better sales forecasts. And now on to some external factors. Now, I would be remiss if I did not mention COVID-19 when talking about 2020. And COVID-19 was not very kind to Nike at first. Nike had to have huge sales to get rid of excess inventory, close down retail stores due to the shutdown, and had to issue a lot of corporate bonds in order to, stay liquid or have enough money, which is not a good thing. However, COVID-19 did help reduce some expenses. Selling and administrative expenses were dropped by 11% because they didn't have to do advertising because there was no sports. But they weren't just sitting idly on that extra savings. They used it to invest in RFID technology and an increased social media presence. These longer-term investments will lead to savings in the future, which is a really good thing for stockholders. Also, as COVID's moving through, different markets, Nike is seeing drops in sales wherever, those waves are. This creates volatility of sales, which isn't a really good thing. However, as we become more comfortable with COVID and the idea of the vaccine becoming, more available for people, it should get better soon. Nike also is involved in social movements. Social movements have become a staple factor in a firm's strategic plan. How a firm positions itself in a social movement can either hurt or help a firm in both the long term and the short term. Nike has capitalized on various social media and various social movements in order to gain momentum in the marketplace. The most notable is the Black Lives Matter or BLM movement. This movement has become the largest movement in US history, with the majority of its members being young people. Nike capitalized on this movement by releasing an ad campaign with Colin Kaepernick, an NFL player who knelt during the national anthem in 2018. While Nike saw an initial drop of sales due to this ad, in the long run, Nike actually saw a 31% boost of sales, which is, really nice. We love to see it. Furthermore, Nike's involvement in the BLM movement will create long-term sustainability and success due to a lot of its members being young. Nike has essentially, formed lifelong customers who will continue to buy their products, as time goes on by just having one ad campaign. Now I'll be looking at the meat of Nike, its financial statements, the good stuff. So since COVID-19 is so unique and has caused the firm to make financial decisions that it would not be able to usually do, I had to, I can compare the financial statements over several years. because, they didn't issue a bunch of corporate bonds in 2019 because they didn't have to. They didn't have to have massive sales because, all their stores weren't shutting down. So I chose to compare Nike with its various competitors of Lululemon and Adidas. And, by doing that, it's because Lululemon and Adidas also, experienced COVID-19. And as you'll see, all of these ratios are done not in their actual numbers, they're ratios. And this is because all of the different, financial statements had different quantities of numbers, so they weren't really comparable. Having ratios allows for us to really get to see and really get to compare. So our first ratios are our liquidity ratios. These ratios measure if Nike can meet its short-term obligations. Basically, can Nike pay its bills next month? While its current ratio is worse compared to its competitors because it's bigger, their quick ratio is actually doing pretty good. It looks pretty cute. This signifies that Nike has a better immediate liquidity than its competitors. So if the economy were to go down again, Nike would be in a better financial situation. It wouldn't have to take on as much debt or be forced to sell as many assets as Lululemon or Adidas. Therefore, Nike is better suited for the volatility of the pandemic, signifying less volatility or less, up and down movements in its stock prices. The next ratios are the profitability ratios. Sorry, there was a fire truck going by. That's what we all heard. The profitability ratios basically tells us how well Nike is able to use its resources to generate profit. Its gross profit margin is lower than both of its competitors, which is not the best thing to see. However, its EBIT, or interest before earnings and taxes margin, is higher than its competitors. This tells us that while Nike might not be as efficient in production, it is more efficient in other operations. At the end of the day, Nike is better able to allocate its revenue in a successful business, conveying sustainable stock prices. And now we'll be looking at several different calculations to see how Nike is doing. Our first is our price to earnings ratio. The price to earnings ratio, or the P to E ratio, relates the firm's share price to its earnings price. It is used to value whether or not, Nike stock price is reasonable. Nike's P to E ratio, as we can see, is 76.11, which is lower than the overall footwear industry of 82.06. This can be a good or bad thing, but it's not surprising. First, in early 2020, Nike saw a huge drop in stock prices due to the pandemic. However, with the volatility of the market due to the uncertainty of the pandemic and the 2020 election, investors are nervous and is driving down the stock prices. However, as I mentioned earlier on in the presentation, Nike is positioning itself to be better equipped by investing in RFID technology and becoming more involved socially. And this will allow them to have better skills to ride out this tumultuous period and raise overall profit. So the current P/E ratio indicates that Nike stock price is actually considered a value price, which is good. It's like savings. Next is the CAPM, or capital asset pricing model calculation. This describes the relationship between risk and expected returns for assets. Is primarily used to price securities and evaluate the returns of assets given their risks. As you can see, their beta is 0.81. It indicates that it is less volatile than the overall market, with one being the benchmark. This tells us that Nike has reduced risk, which means that it's better equipped to deal with the sudden changes of the market. This, coupled with Nike's increased liquidity through its recent issuance of bonds, has positioned Nike to not take as hard of a hit if the US economy was to shut down again. Therefore, Nike's stock price is predicted to remain relatively stable, making it a safe investment. In conclusion, Nike's stock is a good investment to make. The firm has found new ways to engage with its customer base through an online increased social media presence, as well as connect with a younger consumer base by positioning itself in various social movements. Furthermore, Nike has started to invest in new technologies that will keep its factories more COVID-19 safe and allow for the firm to gain a clearer picture of its overall inventory. All of these changes have allowed Nike to raise its revenue and reduce its overall costs. Furthermore, compared to its competitors, while Nike is lacking in some areas, it makes up in others. And through the various calculations, we see that Nike's stock is at a discount right now. It's like when something's on sale, but you're like, why is this on sale? It's amazing and wonderful. So yeah, so now we can open up our eyes again. It is now 2022. You have invested in Nike. You're making all this money. Life is good. Thank you so much for listening to me, and I look forward to all of your questions.
Let's give a quick round of applause for Marilee. All right. Who would like to lead off our questions?
So you made some really good valid points about the CAPM and like some of the certain statistics when it came to Nike. I'm actually going to be tapping into a little bit about Nike myself in my presentation as well. So I just wanted to like ask like a quick question about do you know anything about like the Nike engagement when it came into like being in COVID-19 versus it to being it now? Has it gotten better? Is it still like the same, or is it like gradually getting better?
Yeah, so as things got better, as we did get the vaccine, as things did improve, Nike has become more stable. It's become more profitable. However, as we see like with the situation in Russia, it's once again disrupting our global supply chain, which is not the best. Also with COVID, it disrupted our global supply chain, which once again, not cute. We don't really like her. So there's still that underlying volatility, because there will always be that. However, Nike is using its technologies as well as what it has learned from the beginning of the pandemic to basically increase its sales and have better engagement and be wonderful. So yeah, thank you.
All right, another question. So I'll pop in with a slightly different take on this. Nike is an old company. Like, they've been around for a long time, and they were one of the sort of standard bearers for the athletic shoe and eventually everything else athletic industry. So how much of their success can we attribute to the fact that they've just been in the game for a really long time? Or do we need to look at other factors? Is there something about their ability to survive for 4 decades now that speaks to their sort of favorability as a stock option?
Yeah, that's an amazing question. I definitely think that a lot of Nike's success does stem from the fact that they have learned and they have grown throughout the years, and that they have used different struggles to see things through. I also think that like brand loyalty really plays into it. I know for myself personally, I only really buy Nike running shoes because I know that they provide better support, because I have old man ankles. And so just like having that reputation has permeated throughout the generations and continues to make Nike a very profitable company. And be like, even though they did have that little scandal with I think it was like the sweatshops, which we don't talk about. Even though they do have those scandals, people still buy them, and people still continue to like prop them up, because they know like, oh, my parents used to wear Nike and they really liked it. Oh, I wear Nike. It's really amazing. I'll continue to like pass that down throughout the generations. So yes.
Thank you for that. As soon as I said that, I realized what I should have said was 5 decades, not 4 decades. And I'm also glad you brought the sweatshop thing, because I'm going to kind of pick on Dr. Bolte, who's also in the background at the moment. But for those of us who kind of grew up in that era, that was a thing. That, I mean, I struggled to buy Nike products to this day, because in my formative years, I was told that this was a bad social, and we didn't use the term social justice in a meaningful way then, but it was a bad social justice move. So it's an interesting sort of trajectory to see how they've recovered since then. So I'm glad you chose them. This is an interesting kind of evolution of this very old company.
Yeah, thank you. This was from a class. This is from my investments class that I took in fall of 2020. So right as we were coming back from the pandemic, it was a really interesting thing to research, because when I do a lot of research, I am looking at peer-reviewed articles or looking at the internet. Well, this paper forced me to really look at like financial statements and to look at, investor calls that companies will have, like the company's CFOs and CEOs like are required to have with their investors, as well as make that public for people. Thanks to some legislation, which I think is wonderful and amazing. So yeah, it was a very different way to research. And as an accounting and finance major, it made my little numbers brain very happy, very much enjoyed it. So yes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Marilee. One more round of applause.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I'm very happy to introduce our final speaker for today. Kendall Young is a junior at UNCG, majoring in business administration. He's a member of the Alpha Lambda Delta Honor Society, African Studies Union, Marketing Association, Guy Talk Leader, and was once a community ambassador for the Grogan Residential College on campus. Kendall's paper today is titled How to Monetize Off of Social Media. Welcome, Kendall.
Yes, thank you for that introduction. Let me share my screen. Okay, can you guys see it? Perfect.
Yes.
How you guys doing? Like I said, my name is Kendall. I'm currently a junior here, particularly at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. And I'm going to be talking about how to monetize off of social media. Now, this is the research paper that I did about a year or so ago. And actually, my professor at the time, Mr. Sopper, he gave me the chance to really talk about this, because he was curious himself of wanting to know how to make money off of social media. And as somebody that's interested in marketing someday, it's pretty much something that I need to get into and start focusing on. So this project and research paper itself was very interesting on a personal level. So as I said before, yeah, I was in business administration with concentration in business studies. My main focus is marketing and getting into content creation for brandings and promotions for different companies sports management, social media marketing, ad revenue creation, and many more. So pretty much the purpose of this presentation is about the social media. So as this world is starting to become digital, people are starting to turn towards the internet to make money. Social media has become such a broad topic, and performing reaches throughout anybody instantaneously. So statistics have shown that since 2004, social media has been growing at an exponential rate, and still to this day, it keeps growing, and probably won't stop for a very long time. So as I look to make money off of social media, it shall inspire people to be educated on how to examine the business perspective of it. Now, it comes in a 5-step process. Now, you want to analyze your target audience, who you guys are going after, what is your niche, what you guys are doing. And by doing so, you want to grow your business via off of the internet or digitally. And it helps with that engagement to know who your target audience is and keeping that engagement. It helps you to optimize it to use, optimize it using hashtags or creating content for that said niche. And then last but not least, you want to monetize it, which is basically earning revenue from an asset through business. Now, what is social media actually? So it's basically a form of communication via the internet. People use this as a way to communicate. People do businesses, your best friends, family members, we have like many different ways of connecting people. The history behind this started with, I don't know if people know about this, it's Friendster. Now, this started back in 2003 as just like a little thing that people wasn't really interested in back in social media, but it was technically considered the first social media platform that people could get engaged in. A year later came MySpace. Now, MySpace just made a Friendster like a 2.0, think about it. But MySpace was more, a little bit more developed. It gave people a brighter range of people interacting. Now, Friendster only had people to engage like within their community. And so MySpace, you had the opportunity of connecting with people all around the world. Within that same year came Facebook. Now, Facebook was pretty much the whole thing that changed the game, really. And I tend to go more about that in my next slide, but more than 3 billion people are over on social media to this day and counting. And just about two-thirds of that is people on Facebook. Facebook is considered the biggest social media platform in the world. Now, it was basically lined up with MySpace. They did and almost did the exact same thing. But the thing that Mark Zuckerberg that made Facebook very successful was how it paved the way to monetization with open API application performing interfaces. So that's basically the little rectangular places that you see on websites, the little pop-up ads that you see coming up. That's what Facebook did. It pretty much gave the chance and opportunity for people to put ads onto their website or profile and get people to engage in them. Now, it started off as Face Smash, like more of a dating interaction place, which turned into the Facebook. Then they completely dropped the whole "the" part and just became a whole Facebook. And it blew MySpace and Friendster out of the waters. So completely out of the way, nobody knew exactly what Friendster was 10 years down the road. Facebook was completely the it process, basically the TikTok back in the day. It started off as a college experiment with people, with Mark Zuckerberg and all of his other friends that came up with the idea. Now, monetizing is basically the process of converting something into money with producing ad revenue. Good companies that do this is Nike, ESPN, Apple, Samsung. I can say that Nike, for example, combined has over 136 million followers and counting, and that's on different ranges with Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. They have very different channels for very different niches, like women's Nike, men's Nike, kids, different things like sports wise, soccer, football, baseball. It has a very broad topic, but way for different niches compared to all the different people who engage in it. So Nike really creates a whole form of lifestyle for a sense of community through their fans. So many people that do this would be influencers. Exactly. It would be for monetizing through sponsorships and giving them discount codes. So as you can see, like on Instagram or YouTube, they have these like paid promotions for people that have such a huge engagement of just their lifestyle that they have. One example would be Kim Kardashian. She has a big following. She has very different things like for makeup, for like TV shows, and definitely very big brands endorsements that can help with this. Another would be Cristiano Ronaldo, the soccer player that was a Premier League club for Manchester for the soccer team. Another thing that would be used would be offering paid memberships with subscriptions. So this would be like Netflix, Disney Plus, Hulu. These are the people who got interested in the services and wanted to invest more into it. Like Patreon or different people on YouTube that going on for very wide ranges. Now, a few examples would be on monetization would be YouTube, for example. So people could make about 15% cents per viewer that they access. So let's say that you have, so for somebody to actually have this, it would be YouTube is the second most used social media platform in the world, just right behind Facebook. It is considered one of the big three back in the day: Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. Those were considered the big engagement points from the 2005 to the 2012 era. Then came Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok. Those are the people who kind of like paved the way for the next generation of, kids. For somebody to like make money off of YouTube, it would be at the partner program. So they would have to attain about 1,000 subs and have 4,000 watch hours for the past year and AdSense for that account. They'll be able to qualify for it. So I can give you a perfect example. So let's say that I had a YouTube channel and I made about 2 million views that same year. For about 15 cents per viewer, I would be making, before taxes and stuff, I would be making about $300,000 for that same year. Now, this obviously takes out for, taxes and stuff for that gross pay, but 62% of those users are on YouTube daily. Another good way for people to do monetization would be for Instagram. With e-commerce and paid promotion, Instagram is a very big app to use for this. They give the opportunity for buying and selling goods and services via the internet through paid promotion. It is the most highest organic engagement rate between users and brands. For people that usually follow on Instagram, they follow other pages like Nike and all other different companies, Playboy, H&M. They just want to keep up to date with these said companies. The brand new one that would be considered would be TikTok. Now, TikTok is more for like entertainment for the youth. So that's why I put the entertainment for equaling engagement. That's why many people are, addicted with TikTok. Many people who like end up staying on TikTok. It has so much different niches and different engagement for just a amount of seconds to just grab your attention. That's why many people who stay on TikTok for about like an hour or so and they don't even realize it. Premiums that will be added to this, like I said before, would be Patreon and different personal websites that a few these other influencers have been making. It's just another way and opportunity to get people to be more engaged of the things that you do on those said websites that other platforms don't really give you the chance to do so. So it gives you that paywall to get you and earn a little bit more money versus the ones that don't really give you that chance. Now, I just want to say that in conclusion, social media has a very wide variety of people who are on it, from baby boomers to Gen Alpha. Now, Gen Alpha is pretty much the new generation after us, Gen X. So it runs from like 2010 to 2024. So people who spend most of the time online is about an average 2 to 4 hours a day. This could be LinkedIn for people, responding to emails, people who have that little in between time that wants to be discussing about, certain things and topics, or they just have that little downtime to just go on social media and don't even realize how long they've been on there. A good picture would be the one on the right here with the age breakdown. We have 81% of from 13 to 18-year-olds who be on it for about 81% of that time. 18 to 29 of those will be from 89%. Now, these are usually the people from the 18 to 49 range. Those are the people who usually use it for their business and are more engaged with it for a business perspective of it. And then we have like the older generation for the baby boomers from 50 to 64 that engage in it at 60% of it. And then for 65 and up, I'm surprised about this number as you guys were, for 43% of it. So in my opinion, anybody can do it, but not to the extent that like people really focuses it on. So this is just my idea of it, but what would be like the next innovation? This is more of just like a a rhetorical question behind it that people can just sit back and think of about how crazy since 2004 of how social media has changed the game in like very different ways. You know, for example, we're on Zoom right now. We use social media just to engage with people around the world to know more about what we have to do. And I just think that's pretty cool as well. And I think that in the next 10, 20 years or so, social media is just going to keep growing to a way that people can engage in such a longevity of time.
All right. Thank you, Kendall.
I have one, I think it's trying to, yeah. So yeah, without further ado, thank you guys for listening for that. And I hope you guys take something out of it at the end of the day. And now I will open it back up to questions.
I am so sorry. I totally jumped the gun on you. That
No,
was
you're fine. You're fine. I was trying to like move.
unintended. Oh, I
Yeah, I was
apologize.
trying to move it and it wasn't letting me. So I had to like do it manually. So.
That's great. All right. It looks like Alexis has a question. Start us off, Alexis.
Hi, that was a great presentation, and it's amazing how much revenue social media generates and how big and prevalent it's become in the last like 10 years. Yeah. But my question for you, and I guess this is also a hypothetical question, but do you think that, you know, with social media exploding so much and everybody using it so much, is there a possibility that advertising on social media can become oversaturated to the point where people just become blind to the advertisements that they're seeing and it doesn't feel special to them?
Oh, absolutely. And just like to add on to that, I just think that, you know, social media does have a great influence of, you know, the younger generation, because some of the things that we had to like go through, we had to like learn it like from outside of different things, like, you know, going to the library or just learning it from like personal perspectives. Now the youth can just like easily turn to social media, and sometimes it might not have the best of interests, but they don't really have like that engagement like how we used to, you know, especially when COVID happened. So people are starting to turn towards social media to engage in different ways. And I think like some of the ads, they're kind of a little bit helpful, but I think that it's more of people who are just trying to figure out the way to engage and find ways to make people, how am I trying to say this? Make people feel more welcome in a way by not being so, you know, contacting or in person, you know. Did I kind of answer it? I know it's kind of a little all the place.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, Kendall, you have a question in the chat from Mackenzie. She says, I have one question. What was the most important primary sources you used?
So I use a few, actually. I'll pull up for you. So two of them that what I used to get my statistics from was Social Blade and Influencer Market Hub. Influencer Market Hub is the way that you can like actually like break down how much that you could be potentially making from a tea. So when I went to YouTube, I just typed in a few different numbers that I played with, like the example that I used with the 2 million a year for views. And then I looked up the average amount of people money that you can make from just from one viewer. And then for somebody to actually like engage in that, I had to do the partner program. That's what YouTube usually do it for. They have to, for somebody who is actually qualified to monetize off of YouTube, would have to have 1,000 subscribers, have 4,000 watch hours plus in that year, and they must set up an AdSense account. So you can easily just go onto like these websites and just type in, you know, how much money could you make if you had this amount of subscribers with this amount of views for X amount of money. And then the Social Blade, I just used it for people who already have been set up, like, I don't know, PewDiePie, for example. You can easily go on to into that website and just type in his name, and it'll tell you like how much he made that year, how many views that he got that month, and then it will just add it up from, from that year's perspective as well. So.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Folks, I'm checking our time. So we are out of time, unfortunately. I just want to say thank you one more time to Alexis, Marilee, and Ken Dale for a really wonderful panel. This was a lot of great cross-pollination of ideas, and I hope the rest of you enjoyed your time as well. So thank you all for joining the Honor Symposium, and we look forward to seeing you at the award ceremony at 4 p.m. Take care.